Now, I'll be explaining to you the concept of a grid, because for me, that's what I personally use when I do my portrait drawings. So, to start off, what is a grid? Well, basically, a grid is a set of horizontal and vertical lines wherein it's preferably spaced evenly together, where you put it on your sample image or diagram and you recreate it on your paper. So why? For me, it simply allows me to shift from the L mode of thinking to the R mode. So what is L mode and R mode? L mode is more on the left side of the brain, wherein it's more on the logical side, and we need to do the shift from the L mode to the R mode, wherein the R mode is mostly on the creative side of the brain. So as to explain to you more of the concept of the L mode and the R mode, I want to share with you a book that I highly prefer, the book by Betty Edwards named Growing on the Right Side of the Brain. In summary, her book states that there are two modes of thinking. First is the L mode, wherein the L mode is more on the logical, symbolic, and linear thinking. Now, the R mode is the one which is mostly used by artists, wherein it's more on a spatial, the actual, or the holistic, wherein the analysis of the brain gets to uncover the whole perspective of the image. As to the question when, the grid was already being utilized a long time ago. The Renaissance artists used this. First, they have this fabricated wooden grid, and also they have this what they call Van Gogh perspective device. As you can see, the grids are more archaic, wherein you can see that they have to carry the grids all around when they do any type of drawing. My personal preference for portraits is that I use the grid. So comes the question, how do I use the grid? Previously, on my drawings, I do the grids in this manner. I put this laminated sheet. I put this on the picture itself, and I recreate it on the paper. But now, another simpler application that I can share with you again is this drawing grid maker. Basically, you open the application, the drawing grid maker, and you look for the picture that you want to have a grid on. So example, I have selected this one. After selecting, automatically the grids will be created, and then we press the black and white so that the image will be converted to the black and white. We click the square as well so that the image will be perfectly square. We also do diagonal lines, and we set the number of rows. So for this case example, I'll put an example of 12 rows. So the grid will be much finer. Now the technique that I use after doing this grid application, I get to save it on my computer and I get to print it out so that it turns out like this. So the reason why I want to have it printed out, because later when I will do my evaluations on the tones, it will be easier for me to evaluate the darkness or the lightness of the tone using this Grayscale and value finder. Now, another technique that I want to share with you, which also is included in the book by Betty Edwards, is that when we create the grid, usually we reconstruct the image face on. We do no inversions of the image, so It will be much easier for our eyes initially. But one thing that I can challenge to the artists is that you recreate the grid in the reverse manner. So when I get to draw the grid in a reverse way. So I set the paper on the reverse manner and I recreate the grid in this way as well. Now, the question is, why would we want to reverse the image? When in fact, reversing the image will make it very, very difficult for us to do our portrait drawing. Reason for that is simple. It's because when you reverse the image, what happens is that your left side of the brain will no longer be able to analyze as to what the figures and the correlations are, because the left side of the brain again is more on the logical side, the right side of the brain is more on the artistic side. So again, that's what we want to do. We want to shift from the L mode of thinking to the R mode of thinking, where in the R mode we'll no longer evaluate the image in terms of shapes or figures, but it will only recreate as to what the brain can see. Again, it's a very vague concept for you most probably, but I can also share with you some of the sample drawings from the book of Betty Edwards. So as you can see in the image, the initial drawing of one of the students who took the course was that the first image was drawn in a non-inverted way, meaning to say it was done in the upright manner, like that one. Now, the second image, as you can see, was a more challenging one because the artist was forced to draw it in an opposite, in an upside down manner. So, the evidence shows in the picture, once the right side of the brain is activated, your drawing capabilities will become much more easier. Now, one thing which is good about using the grids is that we can always evaluate in terms of what's inside the box. So we need not focus on the whole image, but we can evaluate on a per section basis only. So for this case, for the eyes, you will basically have a simpler guideline as to what distances are involved and what are the simple shapes or tones involved within the certain box. So you need not think of the other images wherein by doing this manner, looking at it individually and in terms of the holistic side of the image, you get to activate the right side of the brain. Again, we do not use our logic to explain if it's the eyes, are the eyes supposed to be round, are the tear ducts supposed to be shaped in this way or leaning towards this way. We do not use that in drawing. What we basically use is that in the right side of the brain, in the R mode thinking, we look in terms of the image only and nothing more. So you do a shape which is curved towards the going up. So when you recreate the drawing as well on your paper, you draw the curve going up. So there's no explanation why. What shape is that? Is it a pear shape? Is that a tear shape? Regardless. So again, drawing is simply about seeing correctly. You are recreating what you see in your mind's eye. Now, one of the tips that I can also share with you when doing the drawings is that first, when you use the grid, you must ensure to use a lighter tone, a lighter shade. So this is where the 2H will come into play. The 2H is puts off a very light shade. That's why when we put down the layers in our future drawings, it will be much easier because we no longer need to erase the lines or the grids created by this 2H. Another thing, when we do our grid, upon the initial recreation of the image to your paper, as seen in the sample, the image will be very different from the actual or from your sample image. Why? Because in your grid, there are no tones involved yet. There are no shadows, there are no depth because there is no darkness of the tones yet. So, what's important is what you see in the grid, you simply recreate it on the paper. And then I will also explain to you separately how to do the tones using this Grayscale and Value Finder. I'll probably explain that on another video. So, thank you very much, and I'll see you on our future drawing exercises. Please don't forget to subscribe and like my channel. Cheers!